Okay, I am going to go very, very quickly. My background is as a designer, so an interaction designer and visual designer. I studied art, psychology, and design, so it gives you a bit of the background for me. I don't know that much about what I'm about to tell you, but I know a little bit. So I'm going to sort of share with you some ideas and then introduce people who actually know what they're talking about. So crafting your story in the digital world. This is the context for the whole thing. So I'm going to draw a parallel here to the music business. So a long time ago, if you were lucky, you would be pretty talented. Someone would find you, you would record an album, you'd put it out. Really, there was a little marketing involved. It was mainly just getting on the radio. You'd do some concerts. There weren't that many artists to even know about, right? There were only so many. You only bought so many records, etc. Things have changed entirely. Things are totally different in the music business now. And I think it's sort of the same in science, but science hasn't caught up to sort of the changes that have been happening in the music world. Same with newspapers and other industries. So the first thing that's happened, or this is a word to keep in mind, is atomization. So no longer do you just release a record. You record some songs, you release bits of the songs and bits of interviews with you, the artist, and maybe the cover art at different times. You basically have taken the idea of what you are as a musician and the kind of things that you create and broken them into smaller bits that you can deal with separately, and we'll see more of that in a second. So here's a band called Pomplamoose. They have a YouTube channel, they have a website, they have a MySpace, they have a Twitter, and they have Facebook, and on their Facebook, they can have discussions about themselves, they can have photos, they've atomized themselves as a performing artist. You can imagine atomizing yourself as a scientist or a research group. Have discussions, events, etc. Other people can post things in reaction to what they're doing, right? So they've atomized themselves, and then other people can respond to a certain part of their atomic self. And of course, my social network is included when I'm looking at this. So who among my friends is interested in this particular thing? This will become relevant in a second. So earlier, Chris was talking about honesty and integrity and how that's an advantage maybe for you guys. So the nice thing about social media, and I think Natalie, who will be presenting after, can comment on this, is that social media responds best to honesty and integrity. It's really bad to post, for instance, to Facebook or to Twitter as an institution with an institutional voice, but it's really good to post as a human being. It's really good to post as a scientist or as a musician, as opposed to an institutional voice. So atomization. What it means for, I think, us is stories, not story. It's tempting to think that maybe you do some research, you get a paper published, and there's sort of a flurry of activity to get the story out, and that's it. Well, no. As we all know, one piece of data might produce a multitude of stories, and so along with the atomization of content comes multiple stories in multiple formats. Another kind of atomization that's happening is retribalization, where it's very easy to find your community online. So we talk about this as being a bit of a problem maybe if you only find the content that matches your point of view, or if you only connect with people who agree with you. On the other hand, it does let you connect with people who will support your cause, and that's what a lot of these social media tools are for. So who's in your tribe? Who can you collaborate with? Multiple channels means you have to use all the channels available to tell a story today. It's not enough to just use the newspaper or the AAAS's outreach service. You have to get into Twitter, you have to get into Facebook, you have to be on YouTube. But you don't have to put the whole story in each place. You can break the story into multiple pieces. And consider how to do it like timed release medication. So you don't put it out all at once, but perhaps you release a little bit on a regular basis so that you retain that joy of discovery that was talked about earlier today, right? People want what they don't have, and people want exclusive things. So if you can figure out how to time the release, or continually release bits of things, then that is a good way to tell a story. I'll show 3 quick examples as I wrap up, but I'll just give you screenshots of these now. So data, not just messages. This is a topic that's being brought home a lot these days, and I think even the NSF is now requiring some release of data for certain grants. I'll show you examples of how data tell a story, not some written words around the data. The data themselves tell the story. So this is a flight path visualization I'll show you. This I only have a screenshot of. It's basically tracking devices were put on right whales. This is from the University of New Hampshire. and the movement of the right whales was tracked. It wasn't understood prior to this how they moved around in the water and what their sort of like patterns were for feeding. In any case, you can look this up, but the visualization tells the story of what the whales do. The paper also does, but the visualization tells a lot of the story. And obviously, we can embed charts. Someone, is it Eli, who had an example of a really bad sort of printed chart that doesn't really tell the whole story. Well, with the kinds of tools that are available today, you can tell more than just one story with one static chart, but you can tell many stories. I'll show you another example of this in a second. So, these things are all kind of a little bit complicated to make. It's not your expertise as climate scientists and so on to actually build these, but there are people whose expertise it is. They may want to work with you. They may be in your tribe. One way to find them might be through Facebook. So the game Marco Polo, everyone knows what this is, right? So if I say Marco, you say, it's call and response. So broadcast isn't really the way things are done anymore. Call and response is what it's about, and Google's all about that, right? We're a search company, so people query Google, and then we give them something in return. So it's inquiry-based communication, not broadcast-based communication. This is a search I did this morning, climate risk yields Africa. It's not particularly technical, the terms, but look at the results. It's all scholarly articles and a lot of PDFs. If I was actually trying to just if I were a student trying to get in high school trying to get a basic understanding of this, these are the worst possible results. So there are communities that, might be able to help create content that would answer this question a bit better. So you've got to be aware of how people are searching. What shows up when people search for the things that you do research on. And I think this is more or less last, plus just a couple of quick demos. Dialogue is another part of this call and response. Most websites have comments on them now. Probably a good thing, although we've all seen really terrible uninformed comments. It is a way of gauging people's response to what you have to say. On YouTube, just as important as the videos are video responses that people make, and that's what develops a community. And I've definitely seen scientists, and there's scientists do this, sort of talking heads. Also, there's Salman Khan from Khan Academy, this guy who basically does education, sort of teaches math lessons and statistics lessons through YouTube videos. And there are all kinds of responses to him as well. So before I introduce the people who actually know about this, I'll just show you how the data themselves can communicate a story. This is part of the flight patterns visualization, or not. I'll refresh that and go to another one. So the molecular visualization that I was showing you isn't just a still image, but now you can publish, when you do the digital version of your paper, an interactive model of your protein. In fact, you can actually have a lot more than just this, but this is an example of how you can move far beyond a single printed graph and publish the actual data. If you're a newspaper or you're a blog, scientist blogger, you can embed audio content and even interactive charts in your blog posts or your papers. So think about how you can move beyond what you've maybe done today. And now I think I can get this working. You don't need a whole lot of text to understand what's going on here.
What are the colors that you did?
I do not recall. Maybe points of origin? Okay. So these are flight path visualizations. It's one day of FAA data, and you can see that flights, move in certain. The important thing about this is sort of that very little surrounding text or sort of supplementary text is necessary to get a story or a couple of stories out of this. So the guy who made this, he now works here, but he won the. I'm now trying to remember what he won. Maybe from the NSF. I think he won the Science Visualization Award or Art Award a couple of years ago for this. There you go. There you go. Aaron Koblin, Koblin. Okay, that was super fast. Now I'm going to introduce. Yeah, well, not of me just yet. We'll do it at the end. We'll get through everyone's presentation, so write down your questions. Sean Askay. Okay, I can take a couple of questions while Sean is plugging in, and I'll introduce you. Go ahead.
Adam, you said the social media does not respond well to
Not necessarily to groups, but to the institutional voice, which I couldn't really answer that. Natalie might know more about that, but I think, you know, nominally it's a social thing, and you know, people are social, companies aren't social. You do have a relationship to institutions and to brands and so on, but nominally social network, I guess, is for person-to-person communication. Maybe Natalie will be able to say more about that later. Yeah.
You mentioned that people want exclusivity. For me, that's sort of at odds with social media in a sense. So much of it is about these expanding networks.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people have very little intimacy in them, and I was just wondering if you could expand. I mean, is there a different way to think about exclusivity?
Sure. Yeah, I'll give you a quick idea. So, you know, say you manage to meet someone like Aaron Koblin who does visualizations, and there are a lot of people out there who do it. Maybe you give one of them exclusive access to your data to tell a particular story at a particular time before you open the floodgates to other collaborations. I mean, that's an example of something that's totally legitimate and would help string a story along a little bit longer. Okay. Sean is a talented engineering/outreach person on the Google Earth team, and so he's going to show us something about Google Earth.
Yeah, definitely. All right, I'll probably use this one. So Sean and I work on the Google Earth outreach team, and we help public benefit groups use our mapping technology to tell stories. So if I do my job, you guys will all be motion sick by the end of this and need barf bags. So let's tell some stories. Not all of my stories are going to relate directly to science, but some of them will. We got some data. This is casualty data for Iraq and Afghanistan for both the US and coalition troops. It tells a story, not a particularly compelling one, but there's some big numbers at the bottom. Here is another page from the Washington Post. This also tells a story. You've got photographs of all the guys that have died in chronological order. This also tells a story, but I would argue this also isn't very compelling. You don't have a sense of the scale. I mean, 6,000, what does that mean? So a couple years ago, I launched a project called Map the Fallen. And we'll fly into Google really quick, and we're going to start with Ken. Ken was born the day after me, and I met his mom when I started this project. He died when the machine gun on his tank caught a tree while they were going down the road, turned around, and I'll leave the rest to your imagination. He's one of a lot of people that have died in this war. But again, one point on the map doesn't tell you much. It tells you a little bit about Ken. So let's look at a whole bunch more people. So we're going to zoom out and take a look at the entire United States. We'll tilt a little bit here. And I'm going to hit the play button. This is a time animation, and these are people chronologically coming in. These are their hometowns, where they were from in the US before they died. You'll see these arcs, these yellow arcs. These are connecting the hometown to the place of death. So if we fly down here to Iraq and Afghanistan, you'll see data from there as well. So we're almost to the end of the data. I'm going to fly in here in a sec to Baghdad. As you might imagine, Baghdad has had the heaviest casualties in the war. Each one of these is a person. Each one of these, you click on them, you're going to see a photo. You're going to hear about how they died. You're going to see guest books where their friends and family signed messages of love, left messages of love for them. You can read the Department of Defense news release. You can zoom in even farther. Each one of these blocks represents a day in that city. And these are the guys that died on that day in this city. So for any one of these guys or women, I can say, well, let's fly to their hometown. And we're going to jet back over to Ryan's hometown. And he was from College Station, Texas. I can also look people up by their last name, alphabetically, or by their age group, or by gender. So this is an example of how you can take what might have just started off as a big statistic, as a big number, and turn it into something that tells a story, right? These are all the people that have died serving our country. And there's a temporal component to this as well, and you can see that was the invasion of Afghanistan. You can even see the surge that happened, a lot more casualties coming over, and you can pause this at any point. So anyway, this is Map the Fallen. You can check it out at mapthefallen.org if you want to see. Let's get into some other science. some other data sets, more particularly about science. So here's a data set looking at deforestation rates around the world. You guys might imagine Brazil gets a lot of flack for that. You can click on any one of these place marks and you can get a little flash app that shows like a real-time estimate of how many hectares have been logged, some other data about the types of forest that have been logged. And you pretty quickly get an idea of what's happening. Green actually means growth. So China apparently is either planting or has a lot of spontaneous forest just popping up out of nowhere. But this story is also a little deceiving. Let's take a look at it in another way. This is the total area being logged per year. If we switch to total area as a percentage of the country's total area, we start getting a slightly different story. I mean, Brazil obviously still has most of the Amazon, but suddenly Honduras is popping in here with a whole bunch. Let's look at some other data. This is similar. This is geothermal energy potential under each of the 50 contiguous states. You can click on one. All these graphs are dynamically generated using the Google Charts API. You don't have to go into your spreadsheet program and generate them. You just send us a request for an image with the data and the URL, and we'll spit back a pie chart or a bar chart for you. Interestingly enough, this will be our introduction to our next topic. West Virginia has a lot of geothermal potential compared to other East Coast states. Unfortunately, they are a victim of a lot of destructive coal mining practices. So they do a lot of coal mining in Appalachia. This is a layer that was developed by a nonprofit organization that highlights some of the kind of most environmentally devastating mines in Appalachia. So this is one of those mines. You can see what the landscape looks like now. It looks a little bit like the moon. But you can actually load satellite imagery of what it used to look like. So here's a little bit of before, and here's after. And for people that want to learn more about the mining process, we actually set up this step-by-step tour that will walk them through all the different stages of mountaintop removal coal mining. So obviously first they clear the forests, then they do a bunch of blasting. So this is a way to educate the public as to what's happening and how these environmental changes are happening. So there's a big 3D model you can load. Let's see if I can get it here real quick. There we go. So this is a truck. Shows you the comparison, how big these machines are that are plowing through these mountains. Basically, all these mountains are dynamited, and all of the rubble is basically pushed off into the valleys, and they basically pollute and destroy the watershed in the area. Okay, let's take a look at some other stuff. So a lot of census data came out recently, and I like playing with data. So for the Google I/O conference that recently happened, I decided to scrape a bunch of census data and wanted to, do some interesting animations with it. So let's take a look at the number of children without healthcare in the U.S. Over the past few decades. So this is an animation from 1987 to 2009, and you can see all these states kind of move around in respect to their data values. I can pause it and click on it. This was a particularly bad year for Nevada. 25% of the kids didn't have health insurance. Can continue playing it. This is what's called the Google Earth Tour. Once you've set up your data in Google Earth, you can record a flight path. You can record audio narration that goes with it. So instead of just throwing a bunch of data at someone who doesn't understand what it means, you can actually give them a story, a narrated experience of that data, and so they can walk away with the message you want them to have. Interestingly enough, Massachusetts is the best state in the union for kids with health care. Only 3% of kids lacking health care. Yes. So it'd be interesting to kind of mash this up with like red and blue states too, and kind of see how that progresses over time. So that's that. How am I doing on time? All right. Hopefully you guys aren't dizzy yet. Let's try that again. So one of the things that we did, sorry guys, We worked with, for the COP15 and COP16 conferences, my team worked with a bunch of scientists in a lot of different fields and created a set of these tours that kind of walk lay people through some of the environmental issues related to climate change. So this is a tour from some guy you'd probably remember.
Challenges that we face from climate change and the kind of things that we can do together to overcome those challenges. In California, we're already seeing the signs.
So this is data. We're flying into California. We're showing different regions of California. One climate model showing changes in temperature. We're popping a balloon, showing some graphs, showing increasing temperature trends.
Scientists tell us that
I won't make you listen to the entire thing, but you get the idea. You can basically start flying people through your data and creating a narrative and explaining it to them. Later on in the story, they show solar farms and wind farms.
So
these are the actual wind farms that are out here off of, I think, 580. Talking about different climate issues and basically explaining things to people who otherwise wouldn't get it if you just dumped a bunch of data at them. All right. And I think I'm just about, what's that? One more. Okay, we'll do one more. This is another layer that I worked on in Google Earth. This is working with UNEP and basically taking satellite imagery from decades past and recent, and you can basically look at climate change over time. So shoot off to the Amazon. Here's Rondonia. Take a look at what it used to look like out there. So here's Rondonia back in 75. And here it is in 2001. So this is a whole layer that takes different places around the world, showing lakes drying up, glaciers receding. It's a way of actually visually engaging the user and showing them some of the real tangible changes that are happening in the environment. And I'll leave it at
that. Maybe Sean can take a question or two while we get the next person up, who I think is Bing. So.
Questions?
I'm wondering how you got the census data aggregated year by year, because so I'm mistaken, at least the full census only every 10 years. So when 2010 we even know some of the data that.
Yeah, so I basically got I have like population back to like 1900, and yes, I only have for every decade. So I just kind of do an interpolation over a few seconds from one decade's value to the next. So it's just kind of in that example, this was more of a code sample for developers. It was just kind of a straight interpolation between the values. So, any other questions?
What kind of traffic are you getting, and you track what they do after the?
Yeah, sure. So depending on the project, the Map the Fallen thing got about 250,000 hits in 7 days, which, considering it wasn't really widely publicized, it was a personal project of mine, not really like a Google endorsed one. So I was pretty happy with that traffic. It was on State of the Union, on CNN, a lot of blog exposure. The Appalachian Mountaintop Removal layer that was done by a nonprofit, they launched that in hopes of getting signatures on a petition. They had a goal of like 8,000 over the entire course of the petition. I think they got 13,000 in 7 days from like 30 countries around the world. So if you market it correctly and you publicize it, via social media channels, and you create something interesting and compelling, then yeah, you can definitely have a lot of impact. You ready? Okay, I'll take other questions later, maybe at the end.
Okay, so it's a pleasure for me to introduce to you Bing Chen, who is going to tell us a little bit about how YouTube thinks about telling stories. You can use that one.
Oh, yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. This is quite the quintessential Google experience, as I'm sure you all know. Presenting to brilliant people is certainly illuminating for the soul and damning for the ego. So hopefully this will be helpful for everyone. My name is Bing. I work, and yes, that is deliberately unfortunate, working at Google, which is why I work at YouTube. I work on something called YouTube Creator Initiatives, which is essentially charged with identifying, cultivating, and promoting the future Steven Spielbergs, Oprah Winfreys, and of course, our favorite Justin Biebers of the world. It's a very new initiative for YouTube, but as you can surmise, a big part of it is identifying who is a rich storyteller and who can really articulate their message effectively. So my goal today is to really show you a high-level example in sort of strategic categories of how YouTube can be a really, really powerful platform for your use. And so to begin, you're going to forgive my sort of remedial presentation tactics, but I wanted to have an engaging exercise first. So we're going to divide the room into half. We'll do you half are going to be north, you half will be south. And then amongst yourselves, if you could bucket yourselves into pairs and identify who the more articulate individual of the pair is. And hopefully no feelings will be hurt here. And the same goes for this side. You'll see why I'm doing this. Let's do this quickly. Nothing is personal. Amy is going to kill it, as you can tell, the most obnoxious person in the room is presenting for YouTube, of course. All right, are we all ready? Does everyone have a pair? All right, great. If you are the less articulate person for now, could you please close your eyes or put your head on your desk? And again, forgive the sort of elementary school exercise. All right. Is everyone, all eyes are closed? All right. The more articulate chosen ones, congratulations. All right, look at this image. You'll have 20 seconds after I'm done talking. On this half, you have to articulate what you're seeing right now to your partner using only written text and pictures. You may not say a word. Do we get it? All good? All right. This side, you may not use any written graphics or text. You may only use words verbally to articulate what you are seeing. Do we understand? All right, you have 20 seconds. Go. No talking, no talking. This should be a silent exercise. No talk. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Wait, if you are the less articulate person, your eyes should be closed right now. Oh, none of you saw that what's on the screen, did you? All right, well, that defeated the purpose of that one. Anyway, we'll try anyway, and then we'll go by an honor system later. But if you are the less articulate one, your eyes should still be closed, and you're not doing a thing right now. You draw for about 10 more seconds, and then you'll have 20 seconds to then explain what you saw. So the more articulate person, again, you have to identify what you're seeing. Less articulate person, your eyes are still closed. All right? And you have I'll give you 5 more seconds. And we'll go by an honor system for this. You all may write words and draw pictures. You all may not. You may only verbalize what you saw. Not yet. You will do it. All right, time. All right, so if we could go up. All of you will now have 20 seconds to articulate to your partner what you saw using only text and drawing. So on this side, you may not speak. On this side, you may not draw a thing. You may only speak. Do we understand? So the more articulate person is then going to explain what they saw to the less articulate person who is silent, using only words. Yes. But don't try to cheat and, Pardon? Oh, you guys are really fast. Oh, okay. Sorry, then I'm misarticulate, so I'm the least articulate person in the room. All right. No. You guys, wait, so hold on, relax real quick. All right, so relax real quick. We'll start on this side since this side seems to be easier, which is what we would have guessed. On this side, the less articulate person, who did not see what was on the board? Okay, so from one of you, was your partner able to clearly articulate what you saw? And this is what, and this is what you should have seen.
Yeah, that's exactly what she described.
Wow. You should come up here and get this presentation then. So truthfully, were any of your partners able to articulately show you what this looked like using only verbal words? Yeah, more or less? All right, cool. Good. All right, very good. All right, fair enough. So this side then. Well, this is definitely not working out how I thought it would. So this side then, you were not able to use verbal words. Who did not see what was on this board? Okay, sir. Was Adam? Well, that's not fair. This is Adam. Someone else. Adam, of course, was able to articulate using pictures.
Cooler what Adam described it was.
I bet it was. Sir in the back.
Yeah, no problem. Quick.
Really? You guys are really good. Okay, well, for most people who see this, they are not able to articulate this. And the point that I'm trying to make here is that either when you only have the point I'm trying to make is when you only have something that is verbal or you only have something that uses sight, it's therefore limited, right? And so one of the powerful things about YouTube is that instead of just seeing a picture of all these hands in different places, you start to see something that won't play on a website, which is this. And so instead of just having sight and sound, you now also have motion. And that third key characteristic of the triumvirate is really, really critical. And so now what was previously just a picture of some weird things is now something called seaweed that is fairly innovative for video, right? So that was the point I was trying to make. All right, so now we'll get into the real stuff. All right, give yourself a hand. All right. Let's move on. YouTube, as many people know, is the world's largest stage, period. We have literally billions of users every single day and literally 3 billion views every single day. It's a staggering number, and it's something that Hollywood and Bollywood and Nollywood, as you can imagine, try to strive for every single day. More staggering is the volume of content that we have. 48 hours of content is uploaded every single minute. That means that in 60 days, YouTube produces more content than all 5 major networks have in Hollywood in the last 60 years. It's a staggering number, right? Now, granted, some of these things are my cats on skateboards, but other content is also very meaningful, like the kinds of content that you would upload. And so my goal today is really to not only, I guess, subtly dispel the myth that YouTube is for kids and there's lots of sort of only fanciful content, but more importantly, that there's a lot of rich and meaningful content, and to show you sort of strategically how those things play out. So why use YouTube? I'm going to give you 5 reasons at a very high level why YouTube is such a profound and engaged platform. First is because YouTube, as you all probably know, is able to inspire. I don't know if any of you are familiar with this campaign, but there's a young man who was basically ostracized because of his sexual orientation with the university about 1.5 years ago. And as a result, 2 strangers who didn't even know him uploaded a video on YouTube that encouraged sort of, I guess, many minority youth around the world that it would get better. And this simple 3-word phrase, rather than just putting on a poster or using audio, they made a video of this with a very human face. They weren't, famous or anything. These were just sort of, average folk. But before you know it, thousands and hundreds of thousands, and before you know it, millions of people all around the world were creating videos just like this and began something of a social revolution, to the point where you see ads for this, as well as people out in the communities engaged. So the idea here is that inspiration, in contrast to what a lot of industry thinks, can come from basic users around the world within YouTube. And it happens literally every day. These social revolutions happen all the time. Another great instance is, I don't know if you all saw this young lady named Rebecca Black, who sang a song about Friday. She essentially is, I believe, 13 years old, created this obscenely bad lyrical song. Actually, it's not lyrical at all. These are obscenely bad lyrics for a song, and created this music video, and before you know it has hundreds of millions of views. And so this is another example of something that happens very, very frequently on YouTube. I think the second important thing is reach. So in contrast to a lot of sort of television sets, which is very much a lean back experience. So you're on your couch, you're watching sort of passively. YouTube is very much a lean forward experience, which is something that we'll review on Wednesday in the workshop. People on YouTube are very active consumers of content. If you just play something in front of them, don't think that your knowledge alone is going to be substantial enough to keep them sort of ingrained. There's lots more to it than that. One good example of another sort of dimension of reach is how quickly content can travel around the world. This, as you guys can probably recognize, is one of the first visual representations of the revolution in Egypt. It was very much their Tiananmen Square moment, where an individual, an Egyptian, no different from, or I guess very different from all of you, but may not have had, 5 different degrees, but he stood in front of this sort of water pipe and literally got hosed down. And this image got broadcasted across the world, and again was the first real representation of what was going on in the region. And as you can tell by the gradients of the picture, this was taken by an average user, just like you and me. So in terms of reach, not only is YouTube able to actively engage people around the world, but it's able to travel to the hands of even the creators of content, in this case, the news. The next example that I wanted to fly across as well is someone that Adam referred to earlier. His name is Sal Khan. Sal, as you probably know, is a Harvard Business School graduate and a former hedge fund manager, and in his words, decided one day to do something meaningful with his life. And so one day he decided to literally go on YouTube and create these tutorials on everything from algebra to photosynthesis, in this example, to grammar, so forth and so on. And it is literally as primitive as this. It looks like a light bright almost. almost. And he's amassed over 1,800 lectures and millions of views, and is just voted one of the most innovative people of last year by Fast Company. He's making and I can't share the exact numbers, but he's making a lot of money doing this as well. And of course has sort of been taken notice by people like Bill Gates. And so in terms of the point of mentioning this is that YouTube, not only because of the nascent rise of online education, but YouTube as a platform can really be used as a very effective way to teach people different things. And on Wednesday, we'll be going over those specific tactics. Next is Engage. And so how many of you know who this is? Oh, very good. It's mostly the male audience in the room. There we go. So the ad was effective. So this gentleman is from an ad by a company called Old Spice, which is, I think historically largely a male-dominated sort of grooming product. So they create deodorants, shampoos, so forth and so on. And in an effort to revitalize their brand, they decided to go viral. And so prior to the Super Bowl, I believe it was this year, unless I'm getting old. I think it was this year, right? All right, so this year, they released this ad of this gentleman who was going through all these different things. And the idea is that he would represent sort of these canonical experiences that his female counterpart would want. So he has these obnoxious things like, "What's in my hand?" And of course, he has a very deep voice and goes, "What's in my hand? It's those tickets to that thing you love. Now the tickets are diamonds." So again, the idea is really playing off stereotypical things that sort of his counterpart would want. And it went viral very quickly. What they did instead, though, of just distributing content from A to B was to ask for content inspiration from B to A. And so what he did was they went to Twitter and he asked specific people to send him questions. And these people ranged from everyone like you and me all the way to celebrities like, what's her name? One of the famous, I'm going to get in trouble for this. Let's just call her Angelina Jolie. And so it wasn't someone of that status, but someone like her. And basically he would read off the questions that they had submitted and would respond to them in real time. These videos generated tens of thousands of views because he is engaging people in their content, which is another effective tactic that we'll be going over very, very, very tactically on Wednesday. So the message here is engagement. The biggest mistake people make on YouTube is they think you just put your content up there and that people will just consume it. That is not the case. Half of the success equation on YouTube is engagement, to making sure that not only are you A to B, but it's very much B to A. And again, we'll go over tactics there. And before I finish, the last thing I want to mention is this is very easy. So a lot of people, I think, have a visceral sort of allergic reaction to YouTube because they think, oh, production value is difficult, or shooting a video is difficult, then I have to upload it, and now I have to get sort of producers together, so forth and so on. And as we'll share with you on Wednesday, that's just simply not the case. One of the beauties of YouTube, and one of the reasons it's so easy, is because the platform is so malleable. You can show just a still image on YouTube, and it is still something profound. You can show something silent, and it's still profound. You can just use audio, and you can still reach people in emerging markets. Or you can have a full-fledged video and have something extremely effective as well. And as our data shares, our audience on YouTube is highly varied. It's not just people, sort of like me, trying to look for, gaming videos. It really does run the gamut. So the final thing I'll say is a lot of this was sort of through high-level sort of examples of the ways that individuals have exceptionally used the platform. But something I really want to emphasize that I think a lot of, at least people in our industry, confuse, whether they be advertisers or businesses, is that there is no formula to success on YouTube. I'm here to tell you that there is absolutely a success formula to YouTube, and it's something referred to as Haley's Law. And so I will be sharing that on Wednesday very, very tactically to give you sort of step-by-step instructions. We were told to do this, Ms. Luers, right? I'll give you very, very specific instructions on how to leverage and what tools you should leverage on YouTube to make sure that you can have moments like these 5 as well. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Bing, for that very energetic presentation. Any questions for Bing while Natalie, I think Natalie is up next? Yeah, Bing, go for it.
So, question about the metrics of success, and this came up a bit earlier with the discussion, and this learning or something like that was one of your bullets.
Yep.
And the metrics seem to be the number of views of the instructional video. So there seems to be a common metric that we have this many views, we have this many hits, we have this many users, these kind of volume metrics. And it's not clear that an educator for this example that's a successful
Absolutely.
outcome. So where's the nuance?
So no, it's a great point. And I shouldn't be saying this because my marketing overlords are going to get very mad at me, but I agree. Views certainly do not equate to impact, which usually is defined by some sort of action, right? And so at a high level, the way we look at it is direct impact of the actual content itself, and then of course indirect impact. So I'm trying to see the best way to articulate this. Let me give you an example through one of the ones that we saw earlier. The Old Spice commercials got millions and millions of hits, which one person could measure as sort of mind share brand awareness. I don't believe in mind share and brand awareness. It's highly qualitative and sort of very, very fluffy. Well, the way that they did indirectly measure the success was the uplift in purchases for their product. And so while this example isn't necessarily 100% akin to sort of the educational arena, they saw a 11% uptick in purchases for their specific product that they were purchasing. That's very specific. And this, of course, is all other things stable because, there's no other marketing. Perhaps people buy more in January, but sort of all things considered, it worked fairly well. For individual campaigns within education, we can talk more about it at length on Wednesday when we have one-on-one, but as sort of you allude to, it really, really varies on the campaign. But overall, I agree with you. Views are not the only thing. Oh, sorry. Hope that answered.
Okay, one more, really quick.
Just really quick, you said the Khan Academy that he was making millions of dollars. What's the business model?
I don't know if I said millions of dollars, but so certainly a lot of it is from residual payments from sort of his speaking engagements or whatever have you. We also have something called the YouTube Partner Program that I will share with you on Wednesday. It is a monetizable program where we have hundreds of people making six-figure incomes. So.
Bing really took the preview of Wednesday workshop thing to heart. So thank you, Bing. So now I'm happy to introduce Natalie Villalobos, who is community manager at Google. So she will tell you all about how we, as Google, try to maintain good relationships with our users, in particular, probably lead users or people who are particularly important to the success of our products. Okay, Natalie.
Can I actually use that mic
Yeah.
instead of that mic?
Yeah, it's better.
I like to walk around a lot. Cool. So thank you, Adam. My name is Natalie Villalobos, Community Manager at Google. Essentially what that means is that for the past 5 years, I've been building a career in helping to develop not only power users, but users that are online, users that are offline, trying to find ways to keep users engaged, educate users, and really be a representative voice, not only from the company that I represent, which currently today is Google, but also from those users back to that company. So I've worked everywhere from Yahoo to the Institute for the Future, which is where some of my talk today will be from, to now Google. Also worked for a small startup called the Seasetting Institute and Style Mob, as well as Dig. So the thing that I wanted to cover today was how I feel game mechanics specifically and some sharing models that I feel are trending in the tech industry, how if you can utilize these correctly in the proposals that you're not only developing in this workshop, but projects outside of this, how in incorporating these things you'll be able to empower new audiences to help spread the ideas that you would like to share out. That doesn't work. I feel like you can do this if you create and implement 3 different strategies, or 3 that actually go together as one strategy. So to supply a challenge, to develop the collective, and to sustain the campaign. This is one of the women that I think I like to listen to the most whenever I go to a conference. Her name is Kathy Sierra. Love the quote that she says is, just make people better at something they want to be better at. So this is an inspiration for this talk, because what I'm wanting to enable you to walk away with is that by designing for the user, by always keeping your audience in mind from the beginning of developing a concept to driving it to the very end, that they are the audience that you now have completely engaged, you have thought about them first, and not necessarily the project that you're trying to get across, but you're always developing for your users. So 1, and I'm going to cut to a video in a second too, is to supply a challenge. So back in 2009, I worked for the Institute for the Future, and there I helped Jane McGonigal, who, if you guys have watched any of the TED Talks this year, give a talk about how games are leading the way and getting people engaged in social issues, in climate issues, in things that are affecting us as human beings. What are the common problems, and how can we solve them using games? So she was the lead on developing the scientific lab. And essentially what it is we created an opportunity for scientists and technologists to give really short forecasts about a particular scenario that we developed. So not only was it fun, engaging, and simple, but what we wanted to do was to not give hard data, but we wanted to give a theory, something that was controversial, something that would produce outliers, something that would stir up some trouble and get some people thinking about some really fascinating ideas. And again, we always developed with the user in mind, and our main goal was to look for the outliers. So I'm actually going to cut to a video very quickly. You guys can actually see, you can go to this now, it's called play.scientific.org, and note how scientific is spelled. That was always a little bit of an issue for how innovative we were. And so I will play this, and I'll actually explain a little bit of the game very quickly. Hopefully this will this cut. Can you hear it? Okay.
What if you had a precision lens above the Earth? What if you could broadcast a message anywhere in the universe? What if you were witnessing history before your eyes? What if you never got lost again? What if you could protect the ones you love? What if you could see the stars up close? What if you could run one experiment in space? Join the first public satellite network, ISAT.
Your organization needs a space program. You keep hearing that.
So I'm actually going to cut it here, and essentially you kind of get the point. When I'm looking at a lot of the boards and notes, popular notes you guys have written, there's this explanation of the narrative. And so what was really important for us in this experiment was to be able to explain the narrative using YouTube, as our vehicle. And then you could go down here and you can actually, after you watch the scenario, which was in the year 2019, what would it be like for you to pop these satellites into space? People could then, in this particular game, give either a positive imagination card or a dark imagination card. Then once people played off of it, this had follow-up cards, you actually were gifted more cards to play off of. And what made this really fascinating, let me cut back to this very quickly. What made it really fascinating was, and successful, was that we kept it at 140 characters. So kind of like Twitter, you're wanting to have this rapid fire ideation, which is very different than writing like an abstract or a blog post. We wanted people to move quickly. It was time limited. Sometimes it was anywhere from 1 day to 3 days. We limited the amount of players that could play. And what I will speak in like to the next point of developing the collective, keeping it a really small bundle of people, which will develop faster than say you have like a list of, mailing list of 10,000 people, and you're like, how do we save the world? And like those 10,000 people are very disjointed. But if you could get them into small, passionate groups, those are going to be more useful in solving an issue or a challenge. And then those users could reach out to us in real time through the Twitter account and also through blogging. And me as the game masters was sharing back out the outliers and things that I wanted people to play off of and for people to discover. So another point that I want to make is in developing the collective. So one example here is a recent company founded by Dave Morin, who recently left Facebook and wanted to develop a way for people to engage in sharing photos and dynamic content. With this, the thing that's very different is that instead of having 5,000 friends on Facebook and wanting to get as many people involved in your idea as possible, you can only share it to up to 50 people. And I feel like this is one of the more major trends in the tech industry, is that people are wanting to share more discreetly, not as broadly. And this is really important because we're in the age of Yelp, where you're looking for recommendations, you're looking for who in your social network knows what, and you really don't want to broadcast out what you're doing on a Saturday night to, say, 1,000 of your friends, but maybe just to your close-knit 50. So when we're talking about game mechanics and sharing, I think it's important that, in considering your proposal or in considering other projects, that you're wanting to engage, again, small groups of users, not large groups of users, when trying to solve a particular issue. This is one of my favorite quotes of all time. Trust is the only real currency. So this is another company that in the game and geolocation space is called Scavenger. I recommend definitely checking them out. And I wanted to mention here that people could essentially check into places, be rewarded with things that are actually useful to them. So when we're thinking about game mechanics, I don't want it to be about badges. I don't want it to be about points or leveling up. But specifically here, I could check into a burrito joint. I can document what I do with the tinfoil from my burrito as tinfoil origami. I can take a photo of it. I can share it out with my friends, people who are coming later. And if I get enough points, then what I actually level up to is a burrito, another mini burrito, something that I really actually do want when I am there. And here I'm looking at recommendations. And with the challenges that are produced here, I can actually play off of other people's scenarios. So one of the things when you're kind of opening your theory or idea when you're opening your theory or idea into interpretation, you're allowing people to play off of it in a way where you're not trying to hold tight and control the issue. So I really like it how in Scavenger people can play off of each other as they could in Scientific. And last but not least, so in order to sustain the campaign, and this goes back to a lot of my community management experience, when you're developing a strategy or a proposal and you're wanting to incorporate some game mechanics, things that are going to keep people involved, things that are going to keep people engaged, and you're wanting to help them share to their passionate group of friends to help develop that idea, you're also wanting to, at the forefront, create a sustainable campaign so that when you do have this active, engaged audience, that you're going to keep them going. You're going to keep feeding them something because you don't necessarily want to give up this wonderful network that you just created. So this was a game that was actually created called Urgent Evoke. It won the best social change game of last year. Mentors were given to the people who were playing the game during the game and post-game. They had this incredible real life opportunity to go and involve change in Africa, enabling people to not only take action, but to also come back to the online community and be fulfilled and be fed. And I will be leading a workshop on Wednesday around game mechanics, mobile sharing. We'll touch on social media. I was supposed to focus a little bit more on social media, but I really wanted to share some more popular things. And you can't really see this, but this is the 8th annual Games for Change, something to look forward to. Also, the Come Out and Play Festival, which is also in New York. You can ping me on Twitter at @NataliaNV, or you can hit me up on my Google email address, and I think that's it.
Thanks, Natalie. So maybe a question or two for Natalie while Will's setting up. But I just wanted to make a comment to try to connect things here a little bit. So, YouTube and game mechanics are sort of like ways to engage people. What this is really about is the particular community of people you have. I was at a retreat for the editors of Neurology Journal a little while ago, and they were sort of like the room was split. Half the editors loved Twitter and half hated it. The people who hated it thought that Twitter was all about having relationships with thousands of people who you don't know that weren't meaningful, whereas the others were using it to connect with their tribe, other neurologists. They were really using it to their advantage. And I think what Natalie just showed is the opportunity to employ some of those techniques to build a community of people who can really help to tell your story, right? You don't have to do it alone. Sorry, one question maybe for Natalie before we continue.
What do I know about the particular types of people that play games, like the demographics? It's interesting because I think with a lot of people, it can really be anyone. So when we set up Scientific, it was specifically poised to be scientists and technologists, people that aren't necessarily game players online. And I think a lot of them actually weren't, but they were really good at predicting something or forecasting something or throwing out some really awesome big idea. When it was the Urgent Evoke, it was people, I think there's like close to 20,000 people on that game. Most of the people were not regular online game users. These are people who were just passionate about helping their specific area in Africa. They wanted to get behind a community project. And so instead of thinking about what type of demographic, you just find what kind of where can I instigate and develop and build a passionate community? How can I keep feeding that passionate community, people that are willing and able to help drive your idea forward?
Okay, thanks. And last we have Will Luers, who I think is going to tell us a little bit about storytelling with
the network
multimedia.
story.
The network story.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Will.
Pretty much repeating what you. No, I'm going to use
okay,
this.
sure.
Yeah. So stories have always been networked. It is the nature of stories to be memorable, to be passed on, to be repeated and changed according to new situations. So digital technologies, I think, kind of materialize very old cultural processes. But as with any new technology, communication technology, there are very new ways in how we are telling stories and how stories travel. I stumbled into networks, database, interactive storytelling about 10 years ago. I had a documentary project with about 70 hours of footage, and was desperately trying to find a story out of it. But what I had was a really interesting set of stories, smaller stories, that really wanted to be inside of a network rather than placed in sort of a long linear sequence. And at the time, 2001, I came across media scholar Lev Manovich's idea of a database narrative. According to Manovich, and this is from the language of new media, narrative and database are opposite ends of a spectrum. They are natural enemies. This is according to him. Our computer technologies impose a database and computational way of thinking and processing that fundamentally changes traditional narrative models. And he goes on to talk about how our sense of identities are distributed on all these databases. It's very hard for the narrative to contain that very complex way we are embedded in the world. So again, according to Manovich, the database narrative foregrounds computational and nonlinear processes. So randomness, the role of metadata, algorithms, and the important way the user activates the database to define their own narrative, their own path. And that, it doesn't mean that takes away narrative, right? But narrative as a linear cause and effect chain becomes less dominant in the culture. But there are some who argue that actually database and narrative are not so separate. So a narrative, a story, implies hidden possibilities or other possibilities, and are derived from story elements that we all share. So if I were to ask everyone in the room to tell the story of Little Red Riding Hood, you would draw on a collective data set, North American data set, and tell it your own way. And I think a good story is able to, even though it's a sequence, it's able to bring to mind all the other possibilities because you're constantly guessing, right? And we see this complexity in recent storytelling and television series like Lost. Anybody watch Lost? Anybody? Nobody? Where you have a kind of flirtation with computational and nonlinear processes in the storytelling, and in a way you can enter in at any season and sort of, as long as you're covering the whole, all the pieces, you're able to put it together. It's so fragmented. And it's sort of indicating a new kind of thinking. So a story is more than just a narrative. It involves a set of techniques for pacing, for temporal and spatial marking, anticipation, suspense, hierarchies of information, and engaging emotion. Our most common and familiar story form, the anecdote, is shaped around a rising action or development culminating in a climax and then a resolution. And this is scaled in movies and other forms where, so for example, in movies, each scene has this arc, then each act has the arc, and it sort of mirrors the whole. Newspapers, where stories are competing together on a page, introduce the inverted pyramid, in which information is delivered at the beginning of the article and become less important as towards the end of the article below the fold, as I say. In many ways, websites took on the newspaper structure for storytelling, where the home page contains the most important information and everything above the fold. But of course, as I mentioned, episodic television, novels engage in really more complex models where there's simultaneous arcs juggled in a given story. A network story has a familiar structure, a linear structure. And I want to say the way I'm using this is that a network story can be a linear story in a network of other linear stories in an open structure like the web. It can also be a set of stories that are contributed by users in a closed network, like a forum of some kind, but also a story that is itself made of smaller network story. This is atomization. This is Adam's atomization idea, right? That there can be a closed network that is telling a story from all these pieces. The important thing is the network is made of discrete units. These are often narrative in themselves. And some people call them micro-narratives. There's some of us call it snooze. This developer came up with this. It's the smallest narrative unit, snooze. One of the arguments against network storytelling is that it's all surface, diversions, no depth or complexity. We jump from one thing to another in a fragmented way without sustained argument, building of argument. And I think many of us can sympathize with this, right? But the fragmentation we're experiencing now is, as shallow as it seems sometimes, is actually building to very exciting new forms of expression and connectivity. So embrace the fragmentation, embrace the atomization. Fragmentation is an essential part of language. The world broken up into signs gives us the power to think and imagine. I should say I come from a background in film. Montage, the juxtaposition of fragments, has become kind of a shorthand on the web. It's the way to put two things together and let the user make the connection to see the pattern. And that way, let them tell their own story, right? So our brains crave fragmentation, as do databases, right? A novel or a movie, which are these immersive experiences where we sit back and we don't experience fragmentation, are actually very fragmented, right? A movie's made up of scenes and shots. If you look at a novel, it's made up of words. And what creates immersion are rules of grammar and syntax, cultural codes, visual representations, right, rhythm. All of these things are develop over time, and so we're in the middle of learning how these pieces can connect. So how do we get formal relations between snooze in a network story? So computational processes, metadata, algorithms, link structures. A network story needs an agent to define paths, to activate algorithms, to really create meaning. This is where I think much of the authorial voice can come into creating these database stories. Even though you're handing agency over to the user, what kind of thinking can happen with a set of link structures or navigation? How can a thought process be triggered? A link, like an edit in film, can have semantic meaning. If I linked an apple, the word apple to a picture of an apple, that link is kind of invisible. If I linked the word apple to, say, a picture of John Lennon, right, or a knife, or a snake, right, those convey ideas. It's like an edit, right? Of course, social interaction has been talked about, but I think that the way in which users can take stories and change them, or add to a data set, add to a SNU, rearrange sequences, is all very important. Agency brings life to a network story. And then the other thing is media ecology. A network story respects the environment in which it is consumed. 2 more minutes. We live in a universe of devices, all talking to us, often simultaneously. So a 50-page PDF it's not exactly network friendly. One could break it up into parts, but as Adam was saying, having blog posts, video, synopsis of some kind allows that story to be digested in different ways and to travel in different ways. It's friendly to the ecosystem we're in. I was going to talk about the blog as a sort of indigenous form of network storytelling, but I think what you can see here, there is fragmentation. Immersion does happen when you look at the blog as a whole and get engaged with the voice of a blogger. I want to point you, however, to the whalehunt.org. I don't know how many of you have seen this. I think you don't have to care about whale hunting, but what it does is it's able to give you a macro view of a linear story, which is photographers traveling with a whale hunt. And if you click on the mosaic, it brings you up to an image, but it's in a series of images that continues like a slideshow. It's like a little movie, right? And you're able then to navigate through limiting what you're seeing in the timeline by people, by themes, right? So here's just we use this as a perfect example of a new kind of storytelling, and certainly one model of many. I think that's it. I don't have anything to sell for my Wednesday talk, but thank you.
So any questions for Will? Maybe 2 questions before we go to the next section.
Chen, I was wondering if you could, I missed some of the items you mentioned, the things that ask or allow for the connection.
Yeah, I kind of went, well, it's, these are well, metadata. I mean, anything that allows a user to make leaps themselves, and that can be simply tags, but it can also be visual connections. So if you have a bunch of choices on the page, what is the next thing that's going to take you to where you want to go, right?
Have you found that there are limits at the point in which it becomes too fragmented and these are not?
Well, yeah, that's very good. I really think it's very important to concentrate on that linear sequence. It's a short sequence, but that's going to be where, I mean, a YouTube video, right? You got to work on making the YouTube video engaging. But I would say that, I don't know, 3 to 10 minutes, 1 to 10 minutes in terms of time focused on a piece, right? That then you step out of and engage with the whole network. Does that make sense?
I think there's a lot of depth to this. It's something that is a little bit complicated at first and also requires possibly rethinking how you deal with something like your data, for instance. And so it's certainly worth having discussions not in this large group setting to talk about very specific instances in which this atomization can be used to your advantage and the tribalization can be used to your advantage and so on. So thanks to everyone who spoke.